Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul.
Hello there, welcome back to Soul Archaeology. I actually have a cold, which is good timing, so you don't have to listen to me sniffling through the whole episode because I have a very dear friend this week, Sierra McDaniel, who you might know as Subliminal Shift on Instagram, who is a friend, a former client, who is someone that inspires me deeply in her work and the way she navigates life and the way she navigates healing. She is a writer and a mentor for multi-passionate women. Her work resides in the art of inner engineering, from unraveling the limitations of the psyche. As the human behind the brand Subliminal Shift, she walks us home through the vulnerability, contemplation, and aligned action. Sierra and I worked together a few years ago. She did my mentorship program, and it was from that point forward we knew we would be lifelong friends. So it's been just such a gift to have her in my life, and she is truly a well of wisdom. She holds so much wisdom that seems like it originates from a very ancient place, and she's able to channel it in a way that's really digestible and relatable. And I know she's really important to many people, and a lot of people love her membership portal. So I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation today. We recorded it in my living room in Topanga, California. So it was so nice to do it in person. I will be posting the YouTube clip as well. So you can watch it on video as well, which is super fun. And I hope to do more of those in the future. We do have, just the energy that's building towards the eclipses that are happening on the 17th and October 2nd. So we're in the eclipse portal. I'll be doing an episode all about eclipse season on next week's episode that really goes into the full download. Every time we move into eclipse season, I do a really deep, very in-depth and comprehensive episode about eclipses, what they are, what we can expect from that type of energy. I also am hosting an eclipse portal workshop. So these I love to do. I try to do a full moon workshop every month, but eclipses are full moon or new moons on steroids. So it's just, there's an intensity to it. And this is also very significant because the eclipse on September 17th is really going to foreshadow and open the window for us to explore the energies that we'll be navigating through 2026. So a change of guards, and we're really moving into a space of experiencing new karmic lessons and new karmic initiations that we'll be moving through. You can find more information on my Eclipse Portal workshop. I'll tag it in the show notes. You can also find it on my link tree on Instagram. I'll also be sending out a newsletter. So if you are not on my newsletter, I'll put a link there too on the show notes to sign up for that as well. I don't send too many of them. I try not to bombard people, but it's definitely a great way to access, my offerings and upcoming events and things like that. So I would say this week is really dominated by a Sun and Saturn opposition, which is really cracking us open into a space of examining our participation in our current reality, really forcing us to take a very clear and critical eye at where our limiting beliefs lie, where our participation in what's not working within our lives. And this is significant because it's actually forming a T-square between Sun, Saturn, and Jupiter. So we've been talking about the squaring happening between Jupiter and Saturn. We've been moving through that since August. And so this is really going to highlight the last sort of um, energies that are left over from that squaring. We'll have that squaring again in December. It happens 3 different times while Jupiter is in Gemini. And again, this is linking us back to 2020, December of 2020, when we had the conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius at 0 degrees Aquarius. So astrology is fascinating. It is numerical, it is mathematical, it is just such a fascinating and intricate science. And to see how these placements, these transits, these aspects, these planets and these celestial bodies dance together in the sky is so inspiring, to see how they align with the energies on our planet and what we're going through collectively and individually. So there's a lot of this episode with Sierra is so timely because we talk a lot about the inner masculine. That's really why I chose to release this episode now, because we recorded it in July and it just didn't feel like it was time until this week. And so it feels very significant because we are in this work of integrating our inner masculine, and we talk a lot about that in this episode. So I'm excited to hear what you all think. The next episode will definitely be a deep dive into the astrological energies and climate, but I feel like this episode is pretty timely, especially with the interaction between Jupiter, Saturn, and the Sun. We have the Sun opposite Saturn on the 8th and a squaring between the Sun and Jupiter on the 12th, which means that because there's still a loose squaring happening between Saturn and Jupiter, that they're forming a T-square together. So we have this sort of like focus on Jupiter, and Jupiter's ready to burst. It's looking for a way to liberate itself, which means we are looking for ways to liberate ourselves if we're feeling stuck or stagnant or restricted in certain areas. So this is a great episode to look at, where are we missing the opportunity to really work with our inner masculine. Oftentimes, when we feel restricted, I find that there is a lack of healthy inner masculine, which is interesting. You might think it's the opposite, and it actually can oftentimes be that we're seeking more safety to expand. So I'll just leave you with that and introduce Sierra. I'm so excited to hear what you all think about this episode. I hope you have a beautiful week. I will be back on the 16th to talk about this eclipse portal we're entering into. Enjoy the episode.
All right, Sierra, thank you for being here. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy I'm here.
Yeah.
Your couch is so nice.
It's a comfy couch.
We have snacks. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for driving
I'm a
up.
big fan of the Soul Archaeology. I'm your friend, but I also, for everyone listening, this is such a beautiful podcast. If you're anything like me, you know you feel held by Allie's words and her wisdom and the way that she just transmits. It feels like the heavens coming down onto earth, and that's how I feel whenever I listen to you or like you pop up on my Instagram. So
you're the best. That means so much. Truly, I think so highly of you, and I hope you know that. But it's just to be here with you and to be in this space and to think about the evolution of a relationship, and just you driving up here to be on this podcast, it just means a lot. So yeah, we met was it 2022? Yeah.
It was 2 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And I had been following you for a little bit. I forget, it's just the woman web. You like meet people through your network and your spidey senses. And like I had just seen you around and I was like, I have to work with her. And then I remember it was when I was living in Ojai and I reached out to you and we did a free call. And instantly we got on the little Zoom thing. And I was like, yeah, I'm working with you immediately, and I hope to steal you as a friend after this mentorship.
Oh.
I successfully did that. I bagged you. So
You did. It was perfect. It was just so, I mean, yeah, I feel like I'm so lucky to be in the orbit of so many incredible women, and the women that come to me to work with me are just incredible beings, just so incredible. And you're certainly one of them. And I feel so grateful that we connected through the mentorship and through the work, and that you're still in my field. It's just, yeah, it's such a gift. So, and we had never met in person until recently, which is
literally a month
wild.
ago.
Wild. Because you feel like soul family.
Same.
You know? So
Yeah.
it's really, really wild. But you're here in my home now. That's great. Yeah.
So
we're eating cheese and crackers and peaches.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you about so many things today. And we were kind of chatting before we hopped on to record. But one of the things that I love about you, I mean, you're a friend and I find you so inspiring, but it's not just that, it's you and it's your essence and your content and what you create for other people and how you share. And so I know so many people are drawn to you for that reason. And it's really, I believe, your authenticity. And regardless of what you're going through and what you're experiencing, your willingness to share that in a very clear, authentic way, which is really, really powerful for people, I think.
I can leave now. Like that's all I needed to hear. Thank you so much. It's interesting showing up on the spiral that is social media. Starting my account a little over a year ago now, I made this promise to myself that I just would not sacrifice showing all the fractions. And for me, that meant obviously not disposing like personal aspects and like having privacy and like sacredness to who I am and what I go through. But it meant sharing things that aren't really typically shared on the 1% of the filter that is social media. And I think no matter what your niche is or your space or what your title is in the link in your bio, I really believe we're now stepping to a place where it's energy, it's frequency, it's how you show up. And we can talk like that's so broad, but it really is. I've learned that that's like what I do. Like that's my job, is just being myself. And that's also very broad. And that's the only thing that I like 100% get confirmation on from people, is just like, it's just what I bring to the table. And that means nothing. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing tangible about that. Sure, I can have a title and give you offerings and workshops and like all of that. But at the end of the day, like we're just looking for connection. And like we can't do that if we're like so surface level, even with ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's my hot tip for like really building that essence of like, whoa, this person in the way that they show up authentically, which is like a very used word, just being genuine. I think we can really have our radar on now of like who shows up in a way that feels like it's them.
Yeah.
And who doesn't.
So true. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that's occurring right now and will only continue to spiral out and start to affect more people, more industries, more of the layers of how we exist, is the sensitivity to frequency and to intention, because we are becoming more sensitive as we connect more to ourselves, connect more to our bodies, connect more to our nervous systems, to the earth, as we integrate more into this physical form and we reconnect with those senses, the different senses that we have that have kind of been muted. All of a sudden we're feeling more of the sort of like subliminal messaging, or the essence, the frequency, the authenticity. And so I feel like that's why so many people are really waking up right now too, is that they're waking up to what's real and what isn't, stripping away the illusions, which is
So Neptune in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, it's like pulling back. Both of those planets are retrograde right now, which is kind of what what we'll be talking about today is getting really real with ourselves and with our lives and the people that are within it. So,
And how do you do that?
right. And that's it, right? Like that's the question is how, and that's a question for you is how have you been able to create a space for yourself that is really authentic to you?
It's the $1,000,000 question.
Yeah.
I think for me, I had to go on like a lifelong path of needing to fit in. So it's so outside of social media because, as you know, it's just like this mirrored infrastructure that happens in your life with like showing up, whether it's with your parents or your friends or your community. And for so long, I felt so lost throughout my entire childhood and especially early adulthood, college, and then leaving college of like needing to be an image and a formidable format for someone else that I think it was that lived experience that gave me the blueprint. If you're listening right now and you've either been through that experience or you're currently navigating an experience of like, I'm kind of stepping into or pretending to be someone that just is an obligation or in contingency with a job, with a boss, with something else, maybe out of fear of rejection or consequence or whatever that is. And it was really that lived experience that kind of just gave me the anchorage of like, okay, if I'm going to make a social media account and have a business, I want to fucking do it my way. I think a lot of it stems from childhood of like not being told what to do. And I still very much have that. And so that's kind of like for me, I had to get burned so many times and walk through the fire over and over to understand and feel physically in my body that living this life just for one more day, not showing up as I want to, just is imprisoning to my spirit. Like I just couldn't do it, let alone for my own account. So I think it's like, do you want to walk through the fire over and over, or do you realize like there's a cold plunge right next door and like you could go in there by choice, by an act of willingness? That's the hard part. The hard part isn't showing up authentically. And that's what everyone has like a barrier or like a buffer to. That's not the hard part. The hard part is actively choosing that I'm going to show up in this way because it might piss people off. I might trigger people. Trigger warning, you're going to trigger someone eventually on your path. You could be living your best life. It's going to trigger someone. It's going to trigger someone. So all of these things start to come up and they're really in the form of resistance. It's resistance to living the life that is unlived inside of you. And I decided I wanted to bring chi to that unlived life that I desired. And part of that was just posting memes and like being silly, but also being very philosophical. So to answer that in a long way, you have to move through resistance and not see it as an enemy, but as a compass to your North Star.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I mean, the resistance is fear, right? So it's like going into those fears and looking at why do you exist? What are you protecting within me that's terrified of being most likely rejected? I feel like the rejection wound, the abandonment wound is always woven into that resistance to being truly authentically who you are. But it is deep work. It's deep, deep work. It's like the excavation of those spaces that hold the resistance and the fear because it's typically so old and so primal. But I know you've done so much inner work and you're also like, how many planets do you have in Aquarius? Six. You are an Aquarian. And I remember the first time we worked together, I was like, you really are here to live so authentically you. There's really no other way. It makes sense that you would feel that it's like dying, when you're not connected to yourself or when you're not living from that space, because that's really the evolutionary purpose of Aquarius is to inspire others to be so authentic.
I feel like if you're an Aquarius, and there's a lot of Aquarian women, I feel, that listen to this podcast, or at least in your orbit.
Definitely.
I always come back to this concept of hydration. And for the Aquarius especially, we tend to get really dry and scaly no matter what season it is, on an energetic level, on a physical level, if we're not in tune with mineralization. What does that mean? Minerals in the sense of like, I'm quirky and I'm funky. I say fuck a lot. Like, I can be in this space. I can also mineralize and like be a homebody and just like, you won't hear from me for the next 3 weeks. Like, that's an act of willingness to choose that I can be these sort of things without a linear plan on top of it. That somebody else wants, but specifically maybe my ego wants for me. And we can get all into like the healthy version of like masculine structure and planning and all of that Saturn good ooey gooiness. But if there's any other Aquarian women out there, like, this is your time to like, we're so tired of filters.
Oh my gosh.
We're exhausted.
Yeah.
So like, please rip off the filter if, and you have to do that work, right? Of like, I need to see what's underneath the mask for myself, right? And this is what you do with your women in mentorship. And this was what we worked with a lot during that time period together. So it's not easy, but it's worth it.
It's so worth it. I just want to check something.
Yeah.
I just had a freak out moment. I'm like, do I have... This is so great. Okay, perfect. Woohoo. Yay. Speaker. Great. Just had a moment. I always have moments. Yeah,
I'm always terrified. I'm terrified no matter what.
And Missy, may not walk through here. She wants to walk right through here. That's her goal. She's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it. Yeah. Every time I podcast in here, it's like, she's like, oh, like something goes off in her brain. It's like, oh, I suddenly need to walk laps around the house. Suddenly. It's like, she'll like be dead asleep. And she's like, God. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll hop back in.
Okay.
I love the concept of remineralization and your use of, your way of sort of reframing things for people. It's so helpful for my brain because I can hear like the same words over and over and over again, right? Like staying connected to self, self-nourishment, staying connected to your authentic center, all of those things. But the remineralization is so wonderful because it's really like repairing or re-nourishing, refortifying these certain aspects of you that are really essential in life, in day-to-day life, in order to function, in order to be healthy, in order to be vital. And so the hydration, the remineralization is so cool. And it's interesting too, when we look at it through something we talk about a lot, because we kind of we're like business buddies. Which is so fun. We're like comparing notes on how we're reworking a lot of our business structures. And this is something I'm seeing across the board with everyone I work with, people in my life, friends, is this need to rework the masculine structures and the foundations of our lives, our businesses. And it's really the integration of the divine masculine. And you and I were talking about like, what does that actually mean? What does it look like to do that in life? It can happen on an energetic level. It can happen in inner child work, through somatic work, on a quantum level. But what does it look like to integrate that masculine into your business and into your life?
For me, it means really cutting the fat and just getting so earthy with it. Like, I think we can like really go into different realms and it can be necessary. But especially on social media, I think it kind of takes us on a little bit of trip of what it means to incorporate that kind of structure and that like really concrete energy. It doesn't have to be through an ayahuasca ceremony. It could be making a spreadsheet of like, how much did you spend last month, and getting really comfortable with different terms like quarterly visions, and like really just getting earthy. And it's not sexy. It's not trendy. It's not going to be a hack. It's not going to blow you up, right? Like these things that actually support you and hold, from what I have personally experienced, that femininity, that fluidity, that incredible intuition. Here's that remineralization again. Here's that water. What good is it to have that water if it's not in a container? If you can't really drink it, if there's not really even the cusp of your hand or a bowl or a cup to hold it. So that's how I've been viewing bringing in very beautiful but intentional masculine energy, not in a way where you're going to all of a sudden turn into a boss girl and you're grinding and you're like, now I'm going in the sauna and I'm fasting, like not that way, just a way to like, oh, I'm held even through my nervous system, even through a different form of regulation, by knowing that I'm going to cut 3 more subscriptions off next month. Like it's just getting so basic. I think we've just gone so far away in different lands that we forget that I can have incredibly important shifts, like in my life, in my relationships, in my business, especially just by taking one small concrete step of like, can I befriend the term marketing? What does that feel like? What does that look like? Can I make a new spreadsheet? Can I talk to my partner about how we want to save for our trip in 12 months from now? Right? Like that's what my integration has been. And to be honest, like we were talking about, we've done a lot of nervous system work. And that has been so foundational for me actually feeling like a regulated human on earth. I'm super airy, like I am up in the clouds, but to bring me back down to earth, it's been the masculine stuff. Like no lie, it's doing spreadsheets, it's talking about strategy and not getting like icky and like melting, you know? So that's been my journey thus far. I too have talked this a lot with other business friends and colleagues, just women in general, of like, how has it been skipping taxes the past 5 years for your nervous system? I know you're going to the cacao ceremony tomorrow, but like, what has that been like putting that shit on the back burner? Can we talk about that like openly? So that's what I've been nudging at with people in my corner. Like, let's get real. Let's get structure. I'll make you a Notion template. Let's share it.
Yes. I love that so much because it's true. We can get sort of lost in these healing concepts, right? And it's like, oh, integrating the divine masculine. It's like I have to go and do ayahuasca to do that, or I have to, hire a coach to find that. And sometimes it's as simple as, like you said, creating a spreadsheet, looking at your bank account, going through each and every transaction and sitting with what it feels like to have that there, you know? And yeah, the masculine really is that container is what creates safety. And so if you're struggling, if you're in this type of business and this type of entrepreneurship, or if you are just feeling like you're out of balance or struggling with managing the physical plane, the 3D things, really getting clear on money, really sitting down and taking time to look at the things that you're afraid of. And it's interesting because our relationship with money is so deeply connected to our relationships with others too, with our interrelational framework. So that's a whole thing as well. But there's something about the time that we're in, and especially as women and people who identify as women and people who are dating men and dating the masculine and looking for a masculine essence partner. A lot of women are struggling with that right now.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, because it's truly like there are so many men that are struggling in their masculine and even in their feminine too, but so many women seeking partnership from a space of an unintegrated masculine, and I think this is the real work right now, is how do we not be overly masculine, which was really how we were raised in the feminist era and that whole spiel, which was way to the other side of the spectrum. But how do we stay connected to our feminine essence and integrate a healthy masculine,
And I think you touching on the idea that it's a lot of integration work. And again, I think someone could be like, what does that mean? What does integration mean? And it means simply taking that one small concrete step. Because even if we try to overhaul it, or if you're someone who like, I'm going to just go into the masculine with that approaching grinding energy, it's going to backfire and burn out. And then you're going to like hate that type of essence. When in reality, if you can bring fluidity and femininity into that structure, into bringing that basic stuff, the spreadsheets, checking off the subscriptions, just like to-do lists of like, I need to update my car insurance. Like, I need to do these things. And we think they're so boring and mundane and quote 3D, but those are the things that actually allow us to shift and to create space.
Yeah.
What does the feminine want? Space. I don't know about you, but I would love an empty calendar for the entire month to do whatever I want to do. But in order to do that, I need to honestly categorize and put things in place and have organization and tools and systems. And maybe this is also part of like that Saturn energy, is like creating systems while also understanding you have to break old systems. So your old systems of like, what does masculine energy actually look like? Can I reinvent that? Can I bring a gentle aspect to it? Can I have like this harmony, like this true yin yang playtime with it and not feel burnt out on either end? Because I think something that's not really talked about right now either is the burnout of too much femininity, to where you're like so all over the place. And now you don't even have a groundwork to come back to, even if that means, right, like checking your bank account. How much do you have in your bank right now? How much is on the credit card? Do you know how much you need to pay off to completely clear that for the next, I don't know, amount of months or years, right?
Yeah.
That's the stuff, ironically, including the inner work and the child work and all of that. But doing that, holy moly,
Huge.
it will shift things in you and bring new opportunities and create space that you just wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have believed it a year ago until I
Yeah.
like started actually doing this and seeing this as my new inner work, the stuff that I would have avoided for so long. I'm like, that's not cool.
Right.
That's not spiritual.
Yes.
Doing a spreadsheet, me a
Totally.
year ago would be like rolling her eyes at me now, where I'm like, no. Like this is creating something huge in you, and opportunities come out of it. Collaborations, like I've had wild stuff just pop up just from like getting on my shit.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Completely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so true, because you nailed it. It's like the feminine wants space. It wants space to move, to pivot, to express itself organically, and to take up all of that space and to spread out. And it really needs that masculine container. It needs containment. It needs to know where its edges are and how far it can spread out, So if you think about that, it's like, okay, well, are you looking for someone to do that for you? Are you searching for a man to take care of that for you? Are you searching for your partner or for your dad, unconsciously to do that for you? And that's where we really take our power back, and we shift from that very maiden space of seeking that external safety to the integrated mother of ourselves, of our businesses, of our work, of our lives, that says, I can hold this, and I can hold this container. And that's a space where we can create beautifully from too, because there's so many, I have creatives that come to me for work, and it's so often that there's such a lack of safety in their systems that they're in that feminine burnout, like you said, where it's like, it's not inspiring to create when there's no sense of containment, there's no consistency, there's no safety within the system. So, and this is really the work we're doing right now. Saturn retrograding in Pisces. Pisces can be so fluid and so expansive, but it tends to burn out because there's not that containment, there's not that structure, there's not that support within their system. And then Neptune is peeling back the illusions. Where are illusions around what's happening on the physical plane? Saturn is the 3D. It's like lead, it holds us down. It anchors us if we see it that way. So seeing these practices and these tools as anchors really can be so helpful, rather than as, I guess an anchor can be you can view it as something that like holds you down or something that really grounds you, you know?
Ooh. I think just touching on the part too about the partnership aspect, and I want to just infuse the message that there's no shame or punishment or guilt to have if that marrying has come up in your life or has in the past couple of years. That's definitely happened for me with my partner. We've talked about partner stuff and like how that's related to finances and things coming up, that sometimes even on that karmic life path, you have that dharma to express what you need to bring in on a masculine level through other people or containers or partnerships in that way. But it's just offering you a little bit of guidance of like, let's now integrate that fancy word integration, bring those life lessons from those partnerships, from those outside containers. Maybe it's a boss, maybe it's your landlord, you know, bringing that in and going, okay, you're showing me where I can infuse that in my own way into my being, into my nervous system, and how I regulate and have capacity for that. And you know it just from the people that you work with in your own personal life. Those dynamics shift tremendously when you take radical responsibility. And I think a lot of that Neptune work is around victimhood. And that's what we're really peeling off in terms of like, yes, illusions, and you can go to like IRS and like things like that into like that plane. But I mean, even the illusion of how you view certain dynamics and like your responsibility in those quote problems or issues that arise. And for me personally, I couldn't really step into bringing in concrete energy into my life until I really had to peel back the layers of being a victim to those things, being a victim and like very Aquarius, like middle fingers up to structure and the world and like the system and all of that. But I'm like, energetically on a subconscious level, I'm saying that about my own systems. And so I get to use the world outside of me as a reflection to like rework how I even want to look at money, how I want to look at savings and investing and doing like these bigger things in my 30s. So if you're anyone who's like experiencing that partnership or things are wonky and like coming up and it feels constricting and tight with masculine forms on the outside, it's a beautiful invitation, as you've always told me, right? They're invitations for excavation to just witness, okay, where might I be playing a role in that? So I can release that victimhood to it. And then all of a sudden, I take ownership. And I think that's a big theme right now, is taking ownership of yourself and the actions.
Girl, nailed it. Yeah, that's it. Really. It's because I mean, yes, Neptune retrograding through Pisces, absolutely victimhood. So is even Saturn within Pisces, and Chiron in Aries, which just started retrograding on the 26th of July. It's all about peeling back the layers of illusion that we aren't actually in our power.
Ooh.
You know? And this is like this reclamation of the inner masculine, really is that reclamation of our inner sustenance, like our inner ability to view discipline as devotion, to show up and set rules and boundaries and sort of like structures for ourselves that are really healthy and supportive, to say that's a little too far, or this is you need a little bit more here, you know. But it's that idea that we're out of our power. And this happens so often with women, I think, because we're taught that we need an external masculine, you know. And it's that real, it's really an illusion, but it really creates a victimhood because we're so often waiting to be saved, you know, which, gosh, I've lived my whole life within that space, like looking for who's going to save me. And it's deep work to like reckon with that. But once you can actually see where you're looking to be saved in your life, where you feel helpless, where you feel victim to something, to circumstances, to other people, that's where the power lies, because that's where the illusion that we are helpless is held. And once we can reclaim that space, then anything's possible, you know. And that's why the masculine can, why we need that to fully expand into our potential and into our desires, you know.
When the concept of powerlessness comes up for you or for clients, what are tools, practices, what are just the things that you do in those pivotal moments of feeling helpless? Because I think this is happening a lot, or in terms of like that journey to reaching that pivotal point of bringing in structure, bringing in masculine energy. As you know, there's usually some type of rocky situation, or it feels like an earthquake has collided into your life to wake you up or to kind of shake the psyche a little bit in order to shift, because you are essentially reprogramming yourself and like that library of familiarity, both on a subconscious level, a genetic level, a cellular level, all of those things begin to shift, but it's almost like a big die off. It's almost like a big detox. And I went through that going into the masculine, where like I felt on a nervous system level almost a panic attack before I started getting into my numbers and like creating spreadsheets again. And now it's like after a month of doing that, it's no problem. But if anyone's like feeling intimidated or a little grimy of like, I don't know how to step into that space, what is something that you would recommend for them as someone who works on all of these levels, physical, energetic, spiritual, even just beyond that? How do you support that?
Yeah. Well, there's usually a part, an unintegrated or fragmented part that is connected to this belief that we are powerless in wherever that's manifesting and coming from. So first, I always recommend, if there's an actual real physical nervous system response occurring, to like go into some somatic tools to just self-resource, to feel more grounded, to feel more safe within the body. And then you can really start going into these subconscious layers around where did I experience the rupture along my timeline? It's almost always inner child and past life related, and even ancestral. That's been my experience in my work with people. I see that there are components of all of that that are present because they're so karmic. So we come here to heal it, and we've carried it oftentimes through our ancestry and through past lives as well. So there's kind of this little root. So it's getting down into the root and seeing what is the fear? What is the fear? Is it a fear of, if I'm in my power, I'll be abandoned? Is it a fear of I'll be too much?
Ooh, that's a common one that I hear from so many people.
It's really common.
I'll be too much. Because what happens when we're too much? It's so ancestral. It's so tribal. I think of manifestors in human design because they're just such powerhouses. They walk in, you can't not feel a manifestor. But these are the women that are coming out now and just really taking ownership and accountability of their power. But I think all across the board, maybe even on like a karmic level for this timeline and this continuum of like shedding what that means to be too much. And I'm sure maybe this has happened for you with clients, stepping into their power and like shedding that belief, and that it's okay that it might come from a place that you have no knowledge of, that it's ancestral, which happens a lot, right?
So true.
Or even societal. Maybe it's something that you saw in a commercial when you were 5 and it just sunk right in.
Totally. I have a memory of this is one I've been working with a lot lately. And I have a memory of being like really loud and kind of outspoken and really like playful and expressive. And my sister saying something to me. I was probably like 6, maybe 6 or 7, saying something to me that was just like, you're way too loud, you're way too sassy, whatever it was. And it probably was being sassy and loud, but it really fragmented. And that's what you want to look for, is like, where do you have these memories stored in these points along your timeline where there's a shutdown or a rupture or a trauma, and that's where you can go in and start to repair that through healthy integration of the inner masculine, the inner feminine, the mother, the father, which is the work that we're really doing now on a subconscious level, is like, how can we create more safety in our systems? Period. To feel more empowered, to feel more expanded, more expressed, and there's so many ways to do that, right? But I love your work with just going in and looking at things so clearly. Like, you're such a radically honest person, which is, I just love so much. I mean, thank God we need so many more of you in this world. But that's it, right? Is just being so honest with yourself and where where you're self-abandoning, where you're afraid to look at things clearly, you know?
I think a lot of our work has synchronicity in that reverse engineering concept. Because, like you said, it's usually just pieces that have been fragmented or just like hanging around, whether it's in the body or outside of the physical body. And those are the things that feel like dust. Like you've cleaned your house, but it just still feels like you need a feng shui a little bit more. Those are the little pieces that when you happen when you're 5 or 6 and your sister tells you you're too sassy or you're too much. And I had the same thing happen for me where I was like, I owned my neighborhood. Like I was wearing little heels at 5 years old. I was like, I've come here to be wined and dined, you know? And that got shut down so hard. And I remember through school, just like moments of like playing with other girls and just like hearing comments about how I looked or the way I dressed. And it just like immediately created this bubble around my expression. And I truly think a big part of our growing up and adulting is becoming the person that would have saved that little self.
Yes. Wow.
Right.
Huge. Yeah, that's it. And what's great is that we have neural plasticity.
Thank God.
Thank God. And we have a very resilient nervous
Yeah.
system, which can be repaired. And we also have a subconscious it's neuroplasticity, but a subconscious that can be rewired that doesn't know the difference between the past and the present. So there's so much opportunity there to go back and to re-love, recompassion, reparent that part, you know? But it's, yeah, what are your favorite tools to do that? I'm so interested.
So for me this year, it's been movement. I'm not a big workout person, but anything where I'm feeling some lymph move or I'm having some fascia just like recombobulate or I'm feeling my spinal structure. I work out on this. It's not a workout, but it's just like the most beautiful movement through this platform called Range by Cara Duvall. Have you heard of her?
No.
I'm obsessed.
I love the name.
I know.
I just love that. It sounds great.
And I've been working on her platform the past few months. And surprisingly, just sweating has brought me such a meditative place to go to. And I used to do a lot of shaking and a lot of different somatic practices in that format. But just going back to like rolling on the floor or having floor time in my calendar, I have floor time scheduled.
Love that.
And it's like 20 minutes. I'm not on my phone. Maybe I'm reading a book, but like I'm on the floor. I'm just flat on the floor and I'm integrating, right?
Girl.
Like that can be a form of integration is floor time. So again, for me, I think I've made it so complicated because I come from a career and a background of wellness, specifically biohacking stuff. Like that was my job and like the people that I worked with and that whole industry. So for me, I really had to taper it back and I saw how so much of it was excessive and it just didn't belong to my personality or the lifestyle I was trying to live through. So for me, it's super simple. It's laying on the floor. And I think that's what a lot of people need to come back to because you're told so many ways to do things and to make it complicated. And even I think even hearing that word somatic, sometimes for some people, like their brains can like start to like wire and go, okay, now I need to do a whole routine. And of course, work with a practitioner if it's something that you feel you can't do alone or in isolation. Absolutely. But a lot of the times it's just disconnecting and it can be that simple. So like those are like movement and also stillness, like simultaneous balance of those while being on Zoom, while being on Instagram, while checking emails and like people can WhatsApp you, people can text you and voice memo you. And it's just like we're so bombarded with data. I forget what my data sounds like and what the gigabyte was like for that.
Yeah.
From myself. So both movement and stillness and having a balance of that is my go-to.
So great. It's like you're plugging back in.
Totally.
You know?
And you know what's really funny? I read this little snippet of a book that I'm reading right now. It's called The War of Art. And it talks a lot about resistance and what we're kind of theming through right now in this season. And it never dawned on me because I've always considered myself a quirky creative, not in the sense of like I'm a painter or I don't know, a fancy writer, but a lot of people who don't associate themselves as being a creative feel like there's like an undercover jealousy or like emotional disconnect to people that do call themselves creatives, because they think they don't have that illusionary connection to some type of energy field or grid that quote creatives do, which is a complete illusion, because everybody is a creative. You're listening to this right now, you're breathing, your cells move and like they die off. That's creativity. You're creative just listening to this podcast. So I just find that interesting of like the concept of plugging in, because that kind of like goes with creatives. We both work with creatives and we're both creatives ourselves. So I think, again, coming back to like femininity and masculinity, movement or floor time or doing these different things are actual containers for that stuff to come through, for like the next business idea to pop in, or the next newsletter, or like, I don't know, the next piece that you want to write on Substack, whatever that is for you. Those things come in through containers. They're held.
Completely.
Right.
Yeah. And it's so true. The people who have the anchoring, the resourcing, the safety within their system to fully open their channel, that's where it's interesting, because like that's where the real work comes in. That's where the real creative energy and the ideas and the projects and the gifts come through. Because if you think about it, if we're, and this happens so often, I feel like in the spiritual community and even the self-development healing community, is that everyone wants to open their crown, everyone wants to open their third eye, everyone wants to open their throat, but the root is what anchors and grounds and pulls those ideas, those creative projects, the real gems, that like pulls it through and anchors it into the earth. And that's where you can take an idea and act on it. You can channel a song and actually record it and release it when you have grounding, when you have anchoring, when you have that container. Otherwise, you're just pulling in stuff constantly and it has nowhere to go. And it's just like floating off into the ethers, right? I think you're right. We're all creatives and we're all connected to a channel. We're all channels, and all of the most incredible art pieces and songs that have been created were just channeled from source.
Totally.
To create beauty. And so if you think about that, it's like the people, something that's coming up is like Paul McCartney and the Beatles, and the fact that he really was sort of the driving force and very much the masculine essence of the Beatles. He was kind of like the business guy, sort of created a structure when they lost a manager, things like that. And we wouldn't have those songs if he weren't there. You know what I mean?
I mean, for me, I just keep coming back to this like beautiful concept of letting your creations be the flowers so that you can be the vase. But you're not blooming those flowers. That's from a different source. It's from a different place. You probably don't know what the germination process actually looks like on a biochemical level, right?
Yeah.
But you know that flowers are beautiful and they make you feel some kind of sensation. And when you look at them, something happens inside of your body. That's the same thing with our work, our passions, our interests, our hobbies. Those are the flowers, but we cannot hold them in the most incredible capacity with those water mineralization concepts in there too, within the vase, without that structure. And ironically, what we're running away from, the masculine energy and making it obviously very healthy, that's the container. That's the vase for the flowers, for the creation. So I think we're in a really cool time of like, number one, delayering, but number two, rebuilding a relationship to what yin yang actually feels like, looks like, and how that's imprinted in our bodies moving forward. And like you said, working with clients, a lot of that's karmic and ancestral. So of course, doing some work around that and like, what did your parents tell you about money? Like just doing simple practices and like activities around that, but then also ownership of like, okay, but I own this vase. I can own that it's for a bouquet, or do I want a single bud, right? Yeah. And I can change that as many times as I want. But this is the time right now for the next 6 to 12 months. What does the container, the vase look like for those flowers?
Yeah.
That's it.
It's so good. We're going places, you know? We're going places. We need really strong containers. We need really solid vehicles for where we're going and what we're growing and what we're creating, you know? And that's what I'm noticing now everyone's working through is like reworking the foundations. People who've had multi-million dollar businesses are going back to the basics, down into the roots of what what are my systems? You know, like what does the structure of my business look like? Where are my financial channels? You know, what's my marketing? All of those things and what are my intentions, right? And reworking the foundation so that when we enter into this next chapter, this next level, like you said, we have the flowers can grow. They have room to grow. They have a big, you know, even not just a vase, but like a garden, you know, like a raised bed to just grow and grow out of and expand. It's so limiting to feel unsafe in our systems,
Right.
you know?
And there's nothing wrong with the timeline of the soil.
Yeah.
The timeline, because that's something I really struggled with in the past year, especially with business, is how long am I going to be in this soil for? I want to sprout. I want to be outside like yesterday, right? So sometimes that means when you're refining and bringing in structure and like playing with that other side of energy, that you might be underground for a lot longer than you had hoped or wished for, because there's more work to be done under there that you've been avoiding for a long, long time, or at least that was the case for me personally. So if this sounds like really grandiose and beautiful of like, I'm going to bloom tomorrow, sometimes that's the tricky part of the work, is really just like kind of uprooting that idea of the timeline, especially around money or like saving it or making it. And that's a big thing coming up for me of like where my ego is attached right now to goals and what I want to see and like where do I want to be financially next year. And I want this, and just being like, I'm here right now. I'm currently still in the soil and I still have moments of sprouting and seeing the sun, but I'm like a gopher right now. I pop back in and I'm like, okay, more work to be done in the trenches.
Yes. I love that. And
Yeah.
it's true. It's like, I mean, it's around that nourishment, you know, and what you really gain from those more introspective hermit mode times, you know, that are so important to hear your own thoughts, to clear your channel for your own creative nuggets to come through. But it's, yeah. And what's interesting about this time, what you're expressing is that it's so, I mean, time is nonlinear. Our lives are nonlinear. Manifesting generators, especially, are nonlinear.
We are two manifesting generators here, by the way.
Yeah, that's my next question, because I would love to hear you elaborate on your design and how you move through life in that way, staying connected to it. But I feel like retrograde periods, which we're in a heavy retrograde period, and we're even, you know, we're headed into even more over the coming months, but they're here to remind us that life is nonlinear and that we pull back and catapult forward, and that's the dance. It's not a perfect linear line. It's this dance. It's like the dance. You know what it's like? It's like the dance in Dune. Have you seen Dune? The sand, what is that? The sand dance or whatever? Like that's the dance of figuring this out. It's like you have to kind of work with the earth, and you have to think about where you're placing things, and it's not linear.
Yeah. That's the definition of being a manifesting generator. Like you want the entire planet, but you forget that there's tectonic plates and things are going to shift.
Wow. I resonate with that so deeply.
Like you think you build this blueprint and this foundation for your house, and then 5 years later, 6 months later, 2 weeks later, an earthquake happens and you realize, oh, wait, the house was me. So I think this is the time to build the infrastructure and the blueprint inside of us. And that's really the manifesting generator. I have a really strong and biased belief that the manifesting generator is like, that's the new era of business and creativity and artistry for at least the next millennia, because we've been kind of like coming from so many decades long of the manifestor rising to power. I mean, the manifestor was like the kings and queens. This is back when we had empires. And the generators, including the manifesting generators, we were like the worker bees underneath that. And our sole purpose was to like kind of salute and have dignity to the workings of someone else. And so here again is that powerlessness theme coming up for a lot of us of like taking ownership and radical responsibility of the work that we want to do, shedding that selfishness around it, the fear of abandonment. Here's the tribal stuff. Here's the genetic ancestral stuff. Like all of this is so aligned with that because we really are bringing so much to the surface of what it means to be a non-linear person. But I think the trouble with being a manifesting generator is this. We tend to almost use that as an excuse sometimes to not bring in concrete strategy and energy and look at the things that I'm not into that anymore. I want to drop it. Yes, I do that a lot myself. But is that coming from a place of resistance? Or is it truly something that has its timestamp? It has its expiration date. And a lot of manifesting generators in my realm, they don't understand the difference. And that's what's making them feel so leaky. And they don't have this umbrella or this rainbow where all their passions, their interests, their quirks fit under something, not to niche you. I would never want to box us or put us into something as a manifesting generator. But I do want to give you something to hold when it rains, because it's going to feel like rain when you start leaking out water to, I have this and now I'm doing this. And like, I have 20 million tabs open on my computer. So here's what is really needed for the MG is that concrete energy, is that Saturn essence, is the strategy. Can you hold an umbrella under the rain and put your things that always feel like an essence and they have the same value, whether you do Reiki or you're also a podcaster or you garden? There's going to be a similarity underneath all of them, some type of frequency. It's about putting those under your umbrella and then separating what's personal, because that's where we also tend to leak and we forget that we have this umbrella when shit hits the fan and we just are like, who am I? I have an identity crisis now, right?
Oh, yeah.
We need to separate, but that's where the structure comes in. That's where the masculine comes in of like, I have this blueprint and this organization of knowing this thing, I don't dare put that in my work. That's just for me. Like for me personally, I watch a lot of interior design architecture videos on YouTube in my free time. And I have a magazine subscription to interior design. Like I'm really into that, but I don't want to go back to school to be an architect, you know? And old me would be like, oh, that'd be a great idea. And then I could work with clients and creatives and also design their house and just like, shut up, just have it for you. But that's where organization comes in. So I think the next visionary is the MG, someone who's like so multifaceted and we're so inspired and awed by them that they hold it. They're not leaking.
Yeah.
They're not leaking.
Oh.
And this is the work that you and I are both doing right now, specifically in business. But I see the MG and I go, where are you leaking? What's happening? Where are you draining right now? Can we not only just patch it up, but honestly create a whole new piping system?
Yeah. Do you notice in your work that a lot of MGs experience burnout?
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of thyroid stuff too.
Thyroid
because
and adrenals.
of that connection. Sometimes adrenals, but I see a lot of thyroid stuff, mostly because of that definition in the throat center. A lot of it has to deal with that leakage and we're not being held because a lot of MGs were burnt out previously, whether it was in school or their early 20s, or they were working for a boss, or they were killing themselves for perfection. Because again, here's that ancestral stuff for the generator and the MG of like, let me please you. Like me, like my work. I'm going to go down on my knees for you because this work is for you and not for me. So what tends to happen is when the MG goes into their own space and they work for themselves, if you're someone who's in that entrepreneurial realm, you become your own micromanager. And then you're like, I can't have a bath on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. Like I'm yelling at myself because of that. So that's what we're shifting is like, even that's part of like that leakage of energy mismanagement.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Gosh, that's just so comforting even hearing this, because I sometimes forget about human design.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like not the language I speak, but it's so helpful. My first reading was with Jenna Zoe in 2018, I think. And it really changed my life because I'm such a non-linear being and I had so much shame around that, you know, growing up in a much more sort of like Midwest structure. But it's so fascinating what you're saying about creating some sort of, once again, container, the umbrella, like the the space to be held to express yourself in all the different ways you want to, but also knowing that there's a difference between doing things that you love just because you love them and doing and putting things in the work bucket or in, in the bucket of business and brand, which is, for me, I get it because I was doing interior design before I moved into this work, and I was like, how can I marry them? How can I put them together? Because I love both of them, but it's that discipline and that discernment which is so important,
But what's beautiful is that even your Instagram stories, like the way your imagery is around your home, that brings in the aligned client because of like the messaging you put on top of it. But you're not doing interior design. You are doing interior design on an energetic level.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Wow.
So like you
I
have
that.
all of these different aspects of your past. They always come into the work now, even if it feels completely disconnected and unrelated. So that's what I'm talking about when I say the umbrella or the rainbow and putting all of the colors under the umbrella. You're not doing interior design anymore. You are spiritually, karmically, but you're also showing your sheepskin and you're showing your corner. And just someone seeing that, they might not even read what you have to say. And they might not even know you only have one spot left for like the next quarter or whatever it is. But they see the way the sun hits the plant in the corner of your house. And that just sparks something in them.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when like all of your things that you're into, putting it underneath an umbrella, and it doesn't always have to be like, okay, now that I was doing interior design before, let me make really beautiful imagery, because it's just natural to you.
Yeah.
So don't feel like you have to discard them, especially if you're tooty and you have moods. I'm a very tooty person and I can get really sassy with myself, and like I'm having a bad day, I like want to throw it all away, or I'm just like, this isn't working for me. It's been 5 hours of being in a mood. And then tomorrow I'm just like, what was I thinking? And that's a big problem with MGs as well, is like you cannot discard based off your mood. You do not do it. It's going to kill your spirit and you're going to have an identity crisis. It's bound to happen.
So helpful.
Yeah.
How do you see this showing up? Because I know you don't only work with people who have businesses or who are entrepreneurs, but how does this show up for people in relation to life? Like if someone's a stay-at-home mom, or they're working a job that they don't really need to necessarily bring these tools into,
It's 100% connected to their joy. And for me, I see that it's always involving the self. Like all of these things are just reflection of the self. But even if it's the stay-at-home mom, even if the kids are in nap time for 30 minutes, you're scrolling on social media. So it's just about, for me, I'm the person who like, I have the knife and I cut your fat and I'm just like, let's go in. I'm very gentle and I'm cool and funny with you. But also like, I just want to see you really tap into what it means to be alive, because a lot of these creatives and just human artists in general is what we all are. We're leaking outside of just work. We're leaking in our personal lives. We're leaking in the way that we have time to show up for ourselves solo. So for me, it actually doesn't matter if you do your own thing and you're the quote CEO and you have a registered business. I really want to see on a day-to-day, just where are you leaking on all levels, because it's all connected. It's all connected, as you know. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner. Like literally you could keep having oil changes in your car, and that's going to tell me something about what's happening internally. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so helpful. It's like a life audit.
I basically audit.
Yeah.
Physically and energetically, but not in a way. I think the word audit's really scary because we think of taxes and that's just like a programmed thing. Think of audit as an inventory check-in. You're just checking in on your inventory of your life. And we need sometimes someone else to see the blind spots of like, you've had this skew up for too long.
Yeah.
Or there's dust in this corner, or you know what, there's space for something new here.
Yeah.
You have this love of ceramics and you're a stay-at-home mom. And once a week, perhaps you have your mom come in, or a different, I don't know, guardian of the community come in and support you. But during that 1 week, you're forgetting that you love the ceramics. Can you do the ceramics in that 1 hour a week? What happens? It's all simplicity for me.
Yeah.
I just work on the simples. I don't make it complex.
So great.
The biggest shifts happen in simplicity. And
It's
that's
completely true.
That's my motto.
Yeah. When I start working with people, they so often want like all of these books to read and all of these tools. And I'm like, we need to start really simple, especially when you're getting into these really deep layers and you're getting into the psyche and you're getting into identity and you're getting into deep core wounds and fears. Then the system can express in a really wild way. And it can be by going into the most subtle, nuanced space, but it has this reaction oftentimes. And so it's so nice to just make things simple and not overly complicated and be able to just really know that there's monumental shifts that can occur by incorporating one thing into your daily routine or your daily practice that feels orienting and grounding.
But here's that resistance. Because even just hearing that, there's a part of me, even for me, is like, it can't be that easy, right? We have like this collective say around things needing to be hard in order to achieve a result or an outcome or a physical sensation inside my body. Even with rest, I need to do this in order to rest.
Yeah.
That's where the reverse engineering comes in and what you and I do. But specifically, can you allow yourself to create easy change? Can change be easy? Can I just add one thing and can I commit to believing or seeing it through for the next 3 months and how this might affect me and impact me, not just on a cellular level, but in my relationship, in the way that I talk to my plants. Like it molts and it melts into all layers of your life. Are you allowing it to be easy? Like how hard are you going? Are you unnecessarily being hard with changes?
So helpful because honestly, sometimes I believe that so many of our patterns are really connected to maybe 2 or 3 core wounds. And so if we can access one of those core wounds or one of those roots of the patterns and make a small shift around that, chances are that's going to have a ripple effect through everything else. So if we're trying to like go around and repair or cover up or patch these millions of different holes or spaces or patterns in our lives, it's so much efforting. It's so much work. It's like overwhelm, right? And then we kind of go back into the trauma response. So it's like testing one thing, incorporating one tool resource that feels supportive and loving and nourishing, and then noticing how that ripples through everything else, because it oftentimes will affect not just the thing that you're trying to impact, but many other things as well, you know?
Because I think we talk about the word capacity a lot.
Mm-hmm.
If you do not have the capacity to even bring in one thing, how are you expecting yourself to make an overhaul or believe that massive change has to happen from a lot of weight? You physically on a nervous system level can't hang with that. You have to actually do one thing at a time. And I think a lot of people forget how dysregulated they actually tend to be. And it can be nice to like do a 20-minute meditation and be like, I'm so zen now. But then an hour later, they get a call from a mother-in-law or something happens in traffic. Like we forget that we come back and we bounce and we're supposed to have that healthy balance of all of the levels and how we go and move through our nervous system. But it can be really easy for us to get stuck in some place. And we have to remind ourselves that it's not the overhauling that helps us when we get stuck. It's the one thing. It's the one shift and the one change. And I'm sure you have clients who come in who maybe have previously worked with other people or they're doing and DIYing their own thing. But they have a lot of shit going on and they're doing this healing thing and they're doing this thing and they're working with this specialist. And it's like, this is the era of subtraction. I want to see where you're adding and can I just wipe it clean? And can your ego allow that? Because here's that resistance again of like, I'm going to attach to this because this makes me feel like I'm doing something and I'm worthy and I'm a good person because I have all of these additions. What happens if I subtract? Where's my control? Where can I hold on to something? Because that's me, having the director's seat in my life, right?
Yeah. And also, what happens if I simplify my life and there's so much space? Because
That's so
then
scary.
it's so scary, right? It's like, oh my gosh, all of this space means that I have to attune to and be with what I've been suppressing.
Because you know what people are really afraid of?
What?
They're actually afraid of being free.
Wow.
At the end of the day, they are afraid of being free. So, what do you actually do? It's nice
Yeah.
to daydream. You have this much money or this car, or you have a whole team beneath you doing the things you don't want to do. But when you're not doing all of the things that you do, it can be fucking terrifying to actually be liberated.
I'm yawning as you say that, which usually means that we're releasing something. So you just hit something. It's so true. And so often I've identified safety with restriction, and if I'm restricted, it means that I'm safe, I'm contained, something's familiar, even though it's so uncomfortable, but it's so true. Like even when Arlo passed, there was a sense of liberation, but immense fear because all of that space, like, what do I do with all of that space? I was caring for him so deeply and so intimately,
diligently for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but I feel like a lot of people can resonate with that, where it's, if they have children or they have, a couple businesses, or they're, have a lot of friends, a lot of community. It's like, what happens if you pull yourself out of that for just a period of time? What does it feel like? You might feel relief at first, but what happens when the fears and the programs start to creep back in,
Just give it a couple days of freedom.
Yeah. And then you're like,
give it a couple days. And then I think that's a big karmic thing, that we're here to untangle that fear of actually being liberated.
wow.
Because ancestrally, we've been working for others for lifetimes and generations. That's a very foreign territory to actually step into a space where it's yours. What do you do with that when it's just your space? Who are you? How do you show up? How do you navigate that?
Yeah. Mic drop. That's the question I think we should leave everyone with. Seriously. Because that's it, right? Like, yep. Dissolving the shackles and coming into true, complete liberation, which really connects back to where we began, which was authenticity.
Right.
And being authentic is liberating, and so in order to access that, there needs to be an integrated fear of being totally and completely free.
Right. And ironically, creating structure, having systems in place will give you the stability, the safety, and the nervous system capacity to test your edge of what it means to be free.
Completely. Yeah. If you think about that, we're like our primal self in that space of needing containment in order to feel safe. How can we create our own sense of containment? Yeah. Like feeling, I always think about the somatic practice of like feeling your body, like feeling the edges, feeling your skin, noticing where you exist and where you begin and where you end, because that creates a sense of safety,
Right.
And when we're used to having someone else tell us exactly what to do and how to exist and essentially what we need to do to survive, taking the reins back can be overwhelming, but it's the liberation you're talking about.
Funnily enough, it's harder to be free than to be shackled.
I believe it. Isn't that wild?
So we got to sit
which
with
is
that
why
one.
which is why the world is what it is right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Allie.
You are brilliant. You're brilliant. I feel so seen as an MG. I feel so seen as a human, and just adore you and appreciate you so much. I love you.
Thanks for existing.
Yes.
We're so glad you're here. And I'm speaking for everybody who's in this little field with you.
You're the best. We're so glad you're here too. Can you let everyone know how they can stay in contact with you and your bright channel and all of your wisdom?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram, subliminal.shift. And you can find me on Substack. It's Subliminal Shift as well. And that's where I hang out.
Yeah, you have a great community going.
Love it.
Yeah.
It's so real. It's so odd to like actually feel like I know people and it's just through DMs, and that I've made the best of friends with people I might not ever meet in real life across the world. And it's not like I have this huge platform. And I think that's a beautiful thing for anyone like in that space, growing a social media account. You don't have to be like this over 100K person to really feel the authenticity of what it means to connect.
Totally.
Like that's a whole nother conversation for another time.
Yeah.
Numbers and validity and things like that. But I feel very blessed who, you know, ever comes in and feels like a fractal.
Yeah.
They're welcome to stay as long as they want.
Yeah. We have so many overlapping people. It's so funny. Every time we go deeper into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so fun.
Always knows you or has heard of you.
Same.
And I bring you up and I'm just like, isn't she the best? And I think we literally live in a space where we're surrounded by women who love to say your name in a room that is craving it, that asks for it, that there's opportunities for that name. At least that's for me. Like my friendships in my 30s, I hear something and I'm like, I want you to meet Allie. I'm going to send you this account. This person, I love what they're doing. They need to be recognized. I'm going to send them to this person. Like we're in such a beautiful state of friendship. And I've talked to a lot of other women about this right now. Like friendships right now, whoo,
everything
gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I mean, gorgeous.
We require so much within those spaces. It's profound.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how I feel about you. So
same. So join our web.
Yes, totally. Join our web. So fun here. Thank you, love.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for tuning in.
See you next time.
See you next time.